Ancient Mother, I hear you calling. I've always been drawn to expressions of the divine feminine, of the great mothers of compassion from many different religions, whether it's Tara, Kuan Yin, Mother Mary, Kali, Yemoja, Our Lady of Guadalupe, the hugging guru Amaji, or indeed Mother Teresa. These female teachers, goddesses, and saints offer unique gifts, so necessary, I believe, in our fragmented world. They represent the essence of unconditional love, of healing and compassion, while also being fierce proponents of justice and service. Essential qualities, I think, of the ideal motherly love. And that kind of love can heal us, it can hold us, it can care for us, it can protect us, and it can accompany us through this sometimes challenging existence. And I'm grateful that religions offer us these sources as guides that we can turn to when we might need an extra helping of compassion and love. So it was with great excitement that during my sabbatical in March, I found myself being called by one such mother, one such ancient mother of compassion, the famous Black Madonna, or the Vierge Noire in the south of France. Now, according to some estimates, there are around 500 Black Madonnas in Europe alone, mostly Byzantine icons, like the one that you see here from the monastery in Thésée, France, as well as many statues in Catholic and Orthodox countries. You can find them in pilgrim churches, in monasteries, in deep, dark crypts, in vast cathedrals and tiny chapels, each one of them completely unique. They are icons of mystery and hope. Now, the Black Madonna is varyingly perceived as the cosmic mother, the earth mother, the sorrowful mother, the mother of compassion, and the mother who removes all illusion from the ego. Some, in fact, consider her the counterpart of yin-yang energy of the white-skinned Virgin Mary. The Black Madonna is the queen of earth as opposed to the queen of heaven. She's considered fertile and generative as opposed to virginal and incorruptible. Her power comes from nature and the connection to all, rather than being the vessel for God's seed on earth. But both depictions of Mary are considered to be keepers of wisdom and love, worthy of honor and veneration. In Lyon, France, I met up with Hilary, whom some of you know, who became a friend over the past few years as my son explored going to college up in the Pacific Northwest. So we'd been planning to walk the Camino de Santiago along the Via Podiensis, which starts in a place called Le Puy-en-Velay in France. But as we began to research it, we learned that this Camino required traversing the Massif Central mountain range in France, which was actually completely covered in snow and freezing cold during March, with howling winds, and all the hostels were going to be closed. So we decided that perhaps that wasn't the best thing to do, and we decided to drive that pilgrimage route instead. We'd read a book on the sacred and mystical sites of France and repeatedly came across the Black Madonna. She plays a really important and complex part in France's history, so we got curious. Now, there are many theories on the origins of the Black Madonna. Some believe that she dates back to pre-Christian times, when the image of a beautiful dark-skinned goddess was worshipped in many parts of Europe. Others believe that the Black Madonna emerged as a symbol of resistance during the early Christian period, when people of color were excluded from the mainstream church. And yet, the Virgin Mary was likely a woman of color, just as Jesus was probably a man of color, considering they were both born and lived in the Middle East. Others think that the Black Madonna descends from Isis of Egypt, the healing goddess of the earth. And in the ancient Roman novel, listen to this title, The Golden Ass of Apuleius, Isis says, "I am nature, the universal mother, mistress of all the elements, primordial child of time, sovereign of all things spiritual, queen of the dead, queen also of the immortals, the single manifestation of all the gods and goddesses there are." And the text goes on to state that she, Isis, is identical with Cybele, Artemis, Aphrodite, Persephone, Demeter, Juno, and Hecate. Amazing goddesses. In France, the Christian worship of the Black Madonna is thought to have begun in the 5th century, when the first churches were built on sites that had previously been dedicated to pagan worship. And these sites were often associated with natural springs and other sources of fertility. And the Black Madonna may have been a way to incorporate pagan traditions into Christian worship. Excuse me, my throat is very raw today. Over the centuries, worship of the Black Madonna became more widespread in France and the focus of many pilgrimages. Many churches and shrines were dedicated to her, and villages prayed to her to spare them from the plagues and wars. And there are parades in almost all the towns that have Black Madonnas, annual parades, parading her around town, showing how she has protected them over the years. And some of the most famous Black Madonnas in France include the Black Madonna in Lyon, the Black Madonna in Rocamadour, and the Black Madonna in Marseille, all of which we visited. She became an important symbol of resistance and rebellion during the French Revolution, when many of the traditional symbols of the Catholic Church were attacked and destroyed, and many of the ancient Black Madonnas were destroyed too. The Black Madonna was seen as a powerful symbol of the people's struggle against the tyranny of the church and the state, and many people turned to her for inspiration and guidance. So we were curious and humbled during our first breathtaking encounter with her at the imposing Basilica of Notre-Dame de Fourvière in Lyon. Set on top of a mountain overlooking the city, this spectacular cathedral was built to honor the Virgin Mary, the patron saint of Lyon. The cathedral was erected over the ancient temple of Aphrodite, the goddess of love, and parts were destroyed and rebuilt over the centuries. The Virgin's Chapel, housing the Black Madonna, was built in the 12th century, and this statue was placed there in 1751, replacing the one that was destroyed during the Wars of Religion. Now, interestingly, you'll notice that the Virgin and Christ are dressed in special clothing. And you'll see that with almost all the Black Madonnas. Many of these statues, in fact, have up to 40 different outfits to match different liturgical seasons. And very few of them are unclothed. But in most of them, Christ sits on Mary's lap, facing forward. Here she's actually holding him up. The next town, Le Puy-en-Velay, is a magical town with lots of volcanic outcrops. We're waiting for the slide. Thank you. And it's where the French pilgrimage to Santiago, the Via Podiensis, begins, following the way of St. James. And there's about 4 different hills where there are churches on top to different saints. According to legends, this spectacular Romanesque cathedral, Notre-Dame de Puy, was erected over the ruins of a pagan temple following miraculous healings and apparitions of the Virgin Mary. Pilgrimages to the Black Madonna are registered here as far back as the 9th century. And the original Black Madonna was mummified in bandages underneath her garments, but she was burnt at the stake in the French Revolution. And during that burning, legend has it that a small door opened in her back and a tiny piece of folded parchment came out that might have revealed her origin. But she was swiftly consumed by the fire. Now, one hypothesis suggests that the original statue was actually made by the great prophet Jeremiah and given to Moses' priests 600 years before the birth of Christ, that she was part of the treasure of Babylon, given by a great sultan to Le Puys Cathedral. But truthfully, they don't know her origins. There are, in fact, 2 Black Madonnas in Le Puys Cathedral. One in the main sanctuary, and there Christ is sitting on her lap, and one in a side chapel. And the second, more stylized Madonna, which may have been adapted from a statue of Isis, is said to look like the ancient statue that was burned, found on 12th century medallions. Now, as we sat silently with her, we began a new ritual of meditating for 20 minutes in front of each Madonna that we came across. And it gave us an opportunity to sit with her essence and listen deeply within. From there, it felt like Mary, in varying shades, was guiding us along our way. There were statues along the road, in town squares, and numerous churches dedicated to Our Lady. And our pilgrimage continued through countless, incredibly scenic, breathtaking medieval villages. And there we stumbled upon our next Black Madonna in the picturesque town of Saint-Cirque-la-Papie. But we couldn't find any history about her. This one was not wearing any clothing, any drapes, so she was particularly interesting, and we meditated again with her. And from there we continued on to the spectacular cliff town of Rocamadour, which hosts an infamous Black Madonna, Our Lady of Rocamadour. And Rocamadour, I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but actually has 3 churches essentially built on top of each other into the cliffside. It's stunning. And the Black Madonna is found in a small chapel in the middle of the cliff, sort of where you see that big building. She was inundated by tourists and school groups when we arrived in the afternoon, and there was no communing with her with all the noise. So we decided to return early the next morning to meditate with her. And when we arrived, there was actually a nun and 2 monks who were chanting and praying in the chapel, and it was so beautiful. So we sat quietly in their presence, gazing on this beautiful, ornate Madonna. Now, on another day, we took a 3-hour detour through the pouring rain to the tiny town of Cap-Dro, only to find the 10th century church, Notre-Dame de la Noire, Our Black Lady, closed. That's how it was. Empty parking lot, pouring with rain. We sat in the empty parking lot, looking longingly at the church, trying to figure out some way of getting inside. We tried every door we possibly could. That church had been built on top of an ancient pagan temple and spring, and in fact, inside the church, there was a spring. And it's been an important Black Madonna pilgrimage site for over 1,000 years now. And we couldn't believe that we traveled all this way and found it closed. But we had such a connection to the Black Madonna that, undeterred, we decided to drive around the deserted village to see if we could find anyone to help. We were sure that she wanted us to see her. And then we stumbled upon the tiny town's mairie, or town hall, which every little French town has, to see if anyone there might be able to help us. And miraculously, there happened to be a friendly madame working in the office, despite it being the French lunch hour, which is held religiously from 12 to 2, and all the buildings are closed usually. And fortunately, she wanted to help. She knew someone who had the key. So she made a few calls, and within 10 minutes, there was a man unlocking this beautiful ancient church for us. And there we had one of the most unique encounters, because we were able to go up to and even touch this Black Madonna. She was made of beautiful dark wood, plus she's so interestingly juxtaposed with a white virgin behind her. And the Vierge Noire of Cap-Dro also carries a wheat sheaf, as you see, to illustrate her connection to the earth. And you might notice that Christ is actually facing her, looking at her this time, rather than facing forwards as so many others that we'd seen. This was a really powerful experience, getting to be really close to her. Our journey then continued down to Lourdes, the third most visited pilgrimage site in the world after Mecca and Jerusalem. And nestled in the foothills of the Pyrenees, we arrived on a full moon and wandered through the deserted town at night. Because apparently people don't go on pilgrimage in March. They come at other times of the year. So we found the town deserted. And this town dedicated to the Virgin Mary became famous for the visions of a 14-year-old girl named Bernadette. And between 1858 and 59, Bernadette had 18 visions of the Virgin Mary in a mountain grotto. Now, despite not being very familiar, will you show the next slide, please, of the grotto? She wasn't familiar with the Catholic doctrine before. Bernadette was instructed by those visions to build a church above that grotto and also dig a hole in the ground at a certain spot where springs appeared. And she was to drink the water from the springs. And soon word spread that these were actually healing waters. And pilgrims started to arrive from far and wide to heal all kinds of ailments, from cancer to paralysis to blindness. And now there are countless springs set in the hillside just to the side of that grotto where you can fill water bottles. And then there are even giant baths where you can take healing soaks. Now, a lot of these were closed due to COVID, but there's an incredible infrastructure there built of healing springs and baths. So we decided to go into one of the churches on top of the grotto. And there are actually 3 churches, again, built on top of each other, all slightly different. And in the top church, if you'll show that slide, this was taken the night before in the full moon. There's one church below, then one in the middle, and then the spire one is the one on top. And we went into the top church, and I had an extraordinary, what felt like a mystical experience of sorts as I sat in that church. And it's too personal for me to share publicly, but when I reflected on it afterwards, I wondered if I'd somehow picked up on the energy of this place. Because millions and millions of people come to Lourdes each day and they pray fervently to Mary. And it was almost like I was transported into that energy that those millions of pilgrims brought to Lourdes. It was palpable. You could really feel it there. After Lourdes, we went to see another Black Madonna in the church of Saint Ursule in Pézenas. Now, in this market town, we found another closed church. It turns out it's only open for masses on Fridays at 9 in the morning, and we were there on a Thursday. Who knew? Yet somehow we felt like we were being guided to these Black Madonnas and that there had to be some kind of way to see her. So you see just on the left of the door there's sort of a notice board, and there was a leaflet on there with a number of a Catholic society, a local Catholic society. So we took down the number and decided to call this Catholic society randomly. And we told the woman who answered that we come all the way from the United States to visit this Black Madonna. And when we asked if anyone could let us in, she wasn't sure that she knew someone who had the key or that anyone would be available, and that she herself was going to be going home shortly. It was French lunch hour after all. However, she invited us to call her back in half an hour, and she was going to see what she could do. So we went to a local creperie for lunch, as one does. And amazingly, when I called her back, she told me triumphantly that she'd located a key and that she would come to meet us personally at the church in 15 minutes. We really couldn't believe the kindness of people in these towns. And then we had another private visit with another 12th century Black Madonna made of beautiful darkened cedar wood. And we found this Madonna and a few other Black Madonnas en route. But our final Black Madonna was especially impactful in Marseille on the last stop of our French tour. Now that morning, the last day, March 12th, Hilary found out that her mother-in-law died and that she would have to return to the United States that evening. We were due to fly to Portugal at 6 a.m. the next day to begin walking the Camino de Santiago for 2 weeks from Portugal to Santiago. But you're going to have to come back next week to hear what happened in that chapter. That's to be continued, ... But we relished our last few hours together at the 5th century Abbey of St. Victor in Marseille. This cathedral is one of the jewels of early Christian art and architecture. In fact, there are 2 Black Madonnas in this cathedral. One was hidden down in an ancient crypt below the cathedral next to a mossy, algae-covered grotto featuring Mary Magdalene and pagan stone carvings of snakes and green men. You can see the pagan carvings on the side there, and Mary Magdalene is in the back, and there was all this algae and moss growing. You could just feel the springs underneath there. And the Black Madonna sat just outside, guarding this grotto, and the church was built on top. And the other Madonna was upstairs in the main cathedral, draped in a green cloth, an homage to pagan rituals. And once a year, she is blessed by the archbishop and then paraded around town in her green mantle, and she is always surrounded by flowers. Today, the worship of the Black Madonna continues to be a really important part of the spiritual and cultural heritage of France. But back to Mother's Day. My wish for you, my friends, this Mother's Day is that you may be inspired to draw on the Black Madonna's strength and resilience, her protection and care. She embodies the universal love and compassion that is at the heart of motherhood. May she be a source, can you keep her up there, please? May she be a source of comfort and hope in times of trouble, as she has for centuries, millennia even. May her darkness inspire us to see the beauty and wisdom in blackness and encourage us to recognize the gifts and strengths that can be found in all cultures, genders, and traditions. She's a powerful symbol of the divine feminine and serves as a reminder of the deep connection that exists between all of us and between the earth, regardless of our differences. May the beautiful Black Madonna fill you with strength and courage and wisdom while embracing you with compassion and motherly love this Mother's Day. May it be so. Amen.